Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today at RG Podcast. This is Isaiah Diesel, joined with a very special guest, Mr. Brycearonee. We're going to keep it neutral. We're going to call you Brycearonee.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Glad to be
Actually, I do have a quick question to ask you before we get into any of this, but how was your time on The Simpsons?
Well, it was perfect until they tried to make me an evil character. I resented the way that they started writing my character after that. But
okay, so you got the reference. There we go. Look at that.
Of course, I got the reference. But since you got jokes, I'm just gonna put it on because I'm now self-conscious about my hair. So
no, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Too late.
I just wanted to say why you haven't sent me any, just 1 inch. I could take 1 inch, but before we start off, we always like to start with some kind of neutral thing. And as you know, today is a very special day, Mother's Day. And so, did you have any plans today, or did you have any special plans?
No, I didn't have the funds to have special plans, and I'm home alone this weekend and geographically separated from all of everyone I know. So,
where's your family?
I live on the opposite coast from my mother.
Oh, okay.
And my spouse is in the middle of the country right now doing some military training. So, so I'm here with the dog and the cat somewhere running around here. Yeah.
What branch is your spouse in?
Air Force. He's in the Air Force. Yeah.
Wow.
Just like I was.
Okay. Did you guys meet in the Air Force, by the way? Just out of curiosity. You did? Okay.
Sure did.
So did you get to talk to your mom now?
I did. We had a nice discussion. How about you?
I wish. I mean, my only conversations with my mom are in my head now because she died on my birthday on April 13th.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know.
Yeah, I had like a mental breakdown. I had to go to Thailand for a couple months, and I did get her name tattooed on my back there, going down my spine. But any chance you've ever heard a song called "In the Living Years" by it's called Mike and the Mechanics?
A song? No.
Yeah. Well, it's a very powerful song, and we sing it to our parents as kids. I had a really big family, like 20, 25 cousins. But we got together and we sang that song, and the lyrics of that song are really powerful, and it talks about like all the things that you wish we could have said in the living years,
Mm-hmm.
And so I did have the opportunity to reconnect with my father because we didn't speak for many years, big part due to the Christianity issue and stuff, and me being an atheist. And but like
and being an atheist, you said?
Me being an atheist, but like the last 6 months of the last year of my mom's life, we didn't speak for about 6 months because she was so upset about my atheism. I didn't get to tell her what I would have wanted to tell her while she was alive. So
sorry, I have an impatient visitor. So I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't mean to start off on a down.
No, not at all. No, I wanted to talk about that. But can you tell me, like, what is one of your fondest memories with your mom?
Probably not, because I have a terrible memory, but the good side of that is almost every time I interact with her, I consider fond memories. We rendezvous in Las Vegas for my birthday every year. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So they all, like, at this point, they all run together. So it's like a good news, bad news. I can't think of a specific great memory because almost all of them are great whenever I like go back home or whenever we meet up for that trip. Are you okay?
Yeah, I will share one thing before I get started. Let me get some water. Because I have coffee here. I wasn't even thinking about today, but it's Mother's Day when I rescheduled this. It's not Mother's Day in South Korea. It's the next day. It's Monday. So, but I know it is back there in the States, and there's too many. Maybe I won't even be able to tell this. Maybe I'll have to calm down and try to tell it in a little bit. But
why don't we get started and then you can.
Well, hold on. I will. like growing up, we didn't have like medical insurance. So whenever we would get sick, my mom would just take care of us. And ironically, like being sick was some of my best moments growing up, because the love and the care that my mom gave me was like really, really powerful. And I'm not roboting right now. It's just it's an emotional. Whew, okay. That being said, I'm wondering if you could tell me first and foremost, just real quick, how long have you had that cat for, by the way?
I've had Sammy for about maybe 6 months.
6 months. Was it a stray or you adopted?
She's a stray that I adopted. So she was. I found her outside of my mom's backyard.
Really?
But all she had been previously owned because she's. I know that she was previously owned by people, so she must have been either abandoned or something like that.
So real quick, growing up, we didn't have insurance. So every time we got sick, my mom would make like this very special bed for us. She'd put like a bunch of blankets down and she would just like wait there with us.
Mm-hmm.
And, make us soup and bring us juice. And it was a really good feeling, Definitely miss my mom. Okay, got that out of the way. So first and foremost, I was wondering if you can give me any, this is going to be our third and last talk on like LGBT rights, but if you could tell me what has been your impression about our other talks. I told you in our conversation, I can't always gauge people's reactions because I'm sometimes a little bit too caught up, but I watched our last reaction several times and I could see you like rolling your eyes, getting pretty upset. So can you give me any positive or negative feedback? I'd really appreciate it. So
first of all, whenever people like tell me that, I don't necessarily know what they're referring to, and I almost want to watch it back with you to see like which parts you think that I was rolling my eyes at, because I try to make it a point not to do that. So if I ever like find myself doing that, I want to see like where I would have been rolling my eyes. But there were certainly, I was able to watch part of it earlier today, and there were certainly parts of the discussion, the last discussion that we had, where you frustrate me occasionally with the way that you answer questions, and I don't know if you want me to. Yeah, please. I would. If I didn't care about getting honest and sincere feedback, I wouldn't ask you the question. So I'd prefer you abusing me on Mother's Day. Just remember, it is my Mother's Day, so you might make me break out and cry. Well, you just broke down and cried, so I can't abuse you because then I become the villain.
I would definitely prefer you to be honest. I prefer honesty, so go ahead.
So I think the last discussion we had, we were talking about, you were trying to like make an analogy between transgender people transitioning and other people transitioning into other things, right? And I don't know where, I think where you were going with that was to explain to me how you felt about not recognizing that a trans woman has transitioned into a woman. I think that was the point of the analogy. Mm-hmm. Some of the things you were comparing it to were somebody turning into a table, or you turning into a 17-year-old or turning Korean or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And so I asked you the question, the first question I asked you, and I think it was around the 36-minute mark, because I wanted to timestamp it so that I would remember it. I asked you if you understood that there was a difference between sex and gender. Mm-hmm. And you said, I don't really see them as different. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then later, a few minutes later, I asked you, can you understand how a transgender person might feel offended by the comparisons you're making and why they would consider that an inappropriate analogy? Do you remember what your response was?
I think I think it's appropriate. Is that what that was? Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it's an appropriate analogy. And so the point I'm making in bringing up these responses, you go by empathy or respect, right? That's your title. So Empathy. What is empathy? Empathy is about being able to understand and share another person's views and feelings and consider how they feel about things, right? And respect is about offering, I think I looked it up and it said something like due regard for the feelings and rights and wishes of other people. Mm-hmm. But your answer to both of those questions disregarded both of those things, because you kind of made it about yourself, right? The point of the question was to see whether or not you could see how they felt about it. Could you put yourself in their shoes? Could you understand how they would be offended? And your response was, it's an appropriate analogy, which tells me no. Like, that's basically another way of saying no. I can't see how they would be offended.
So I do want to say this. I will give you props, and whenever I took myself off screen and I allowed you to speak your piece on what you wish people knew about the transgender community or the LGBT community, I thought a really good thing that you said was just try to imagine yourself, or I try to imagine myself as if someone were telling me that I wasn't a male, you know, like if someone said, "Hey, Isaiah, you're not a male," you know, and so if you have society basically denying who you are and calling you a liar to, I know that I'm a male, you know? So if it's a trans male, a woman, a biological woman, I got to be careful. You can see many times in these talks, I try to catch myself because I don't want to use language that's
biological female who has transitioned into a man is the thing you're talking about now.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That is a bit confusing. I told you initially that I thought that, if I were to hear the expression a trans woman, I would have think that that's a woman who transitioned to man. Just initially, you know, I've been disabused of a lot of the misconceptions that I had from a lot of these talks. But that being said, you know, I thought that was good. But let me play the empathy card for you, because I will say this, that as a Christian, as a believer, we are in our own sense trans species. We are in a transitionary stage between here and heaven, and have a spiritual body trapped inside of a physical body. And that plays out some ways that's not totally comfortable for us, because we're sinful beings, and we do things. I do things so frequently that I know are wrong and just totally violate my conscience. I can't even believe it as a father, as a Christian, you know, as a husband. It's totally incongruent. And so I do understand a feeling of, I feel like I'm something that I'm not yet right now. So in that sense, I totally get it, right? I totally get it. But this community, see, I might have more, I might put some more weight behind what you just said right now, if it wasn't for the fact that this community goes so far out of their way to disprove who we are as Christians, you know? Like if they did, what do you mean? Hold on. Let me finish. God, let me finish, Bryce. This community, the atheist and the trans community, they go so far out of their way to disprove and say that we're not who we are as far as Christians. We either have delusions, or we're lying, or we're just not smart because we haven't studied the evidence or whatever. So that gives me some pause to say, why is it that you get a free pass? You get to question everything about us. You get to belittle us. But if we voice our honest to God opinion that we don't believe that this is something that's happened, then all of a sudden we're hateful. But you're not hateful to point it out. But go ahead.
Do two wrongs make a right?
No.
Then that's why.
Two lefts do.
So that's the first part of my answer. Okay. The second part is, do you consider me a member of those communities?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely.
Okay.
I consider you a trans activist.
Pardon?
I consider you a trans activist. You may not consider yourself, but I do.
Okay, you consider me a trans activist, and you consider me an atheist. Like, you agree that I'm an atheist. Okay. Have I ever done that?
Well, you've told me face to face that computer to computer, screen to screen, that you didn't believe my story. So, I mean, that is a bit hurtful just to say, hey, I don't believe that you actually had this experience, that you really had this experience, that this has to be, Bryce, the only logical conclusion is that I'm just delusional. you can try to wish-wash that. You could try to rebrand that. You could try to say whatever you want, but that is me. It's a dog whistle. Okay, it's a dog whistle, and you're saying that I'm delusional because I've had these experiences, and these experiences exist solely in my mind. So that's what you're saying by defact. So that's what, you can say whatever you want, but just be honest about what you're doing, what you're saying. You know what I mean?
Well, but did I say, you're saying I said that, but I didn't actually say that. That may be what you heard, but I didn't say that. When I say I don't believe that the experiences happen to you, first of all, I didn't even say that. I didn't say I don't believe these experiences. I'm sure that you had experiences. The question is about the nature of the experiences, whether the experiences are indicative of reality. And that's your perception, right? So there's a difference between me acknowledging that someone had an experience and not believing that the experience is indicative of reality. It doesn't mean that I don't think you had an experience. I don't think that you're making it up. Now, when you get to the delusional part of it, I never said that. One, because I don't know what your experience is.
It's implied, though. It's implied.
Well, you inferred it. But one, I'm not sure if you even know what a delusion is. I do, because I study psychology, and I'm very careful to not accuse people of delusions, because I know what delusional behavior actually is, or what a delusion actually is. And I don't think most people who think they've had spiritual experiences are delusional. I was a spiritual person. I consider myself a spiritual person in the past, and I had experiences that I would have considered to be spiritual at that time. And I wasn't delusional. So I wouldn't assume that about someone else who thinks that they've had spiritual experience. It depends on the nature of the experience and the details of the experience, which I don't have because we never had that discussion. So I'm not accusing you of being delusional. I'm not accusing you of being a liar. I don't agree with your conclusion. And that's all I can say. I don't have enough information to speak to your mental state beyond that.
But you could recognize that and say you actually still like me as a human being, right? Like you think I'm we never met, but you might like my clever intellect and my charming good looks. Like you could agree with that, right?
This is you're going tongue in cheek here. So,
but you could say that you like me, right? And you support my rights to practice what I believe is real. Well, those
are two different things. I can support people's rights who I don't like too. So that's not related to whether I like you. I support your right to do whatever you want to do within, the bounds of the law. As far as whether I like you, there are things about you that I like. There are other things about you that I don't like.
Okay.
I don't know you enough to make a statement about the totality of your character, though, because we've only ever interacted several times.
5 times. This is the 5th time.
Okay, but digitally, like we've never actually met before.
Sure.
What you're like as a, to your family. I don't even know how you are with like other people. I only know how you are with me in these particular conversations. We haven't talked in depth about a lot of these issues. We've only talked, with the
surface level.
Yeah, at the surface level with the script that you're doing. So there are some things that you say that I like. There are other things that you say that I don't like. But I'm open-minded towards you being I think that you're a good person in most areas. I think that there are some areas where you might be confused about that you think you're doing good, but you might actually be doing harm.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Which is no different than how I feel about a lot of other religious people. And actually, it's no different than how I feel about a lot of other non-religious people, too.
Well, I was going to say, do you have that same opinion about atheists, that they do stuff that's not really good as well? Like,
yeah, they do. And you aren't a part. You're not a part of this group, but I just made a list today of several atheists that I've since disassociated myself from because of I think that they're shitty people. So sorry, I know you don't like cussing. So, But the point is, it hasn't.
I called you Sideshow Bob, so you can cuss because you didn't cuss at that point.
It's not specific to a person's theological beliefs. It's what specific things that you believe in. See, not every Christian is like transphobic or homophobic or anything like that, right?
But Bryce, I'm sorry. Good. No, please finish.
No, go ahead.
No, please finish. I sometimes think you're done, but please finish.
It's not based on whether the person's a Christian, a Muslim, Jewish, atheist, theist, whatever. Like that doesn't determine whether I like them or not. It's how my interactions go with them and how I get a sense of what positions they stand for and why they hold the views that they do, you know?
But okay, but Bryce, though, I do want just to throw something out there, like just because. I'm sorry?
Throw it out.
Yeah, so just because I was a Christian, and let's say just because I thought like homosexuality was a sin, that doesn't mean necessarily that that's something that like if I had the right to make sins and not sins, that might not be something I would want to make a sin in the first place. You know what I mean? Because and I'm not saying that is or isn't the case, but you don't know, because I'm a Christian, because I've had a religious experience, that means I'm bound to this book. Okay. But that doesn't mean that everything in that book makes sense to me or that I agree with everything that's in there. You know, people talk about the genocides and the flooding and all this X, Y, and Z. It's like, I certainly wouldn't have been okay with that. You know, that causes a great deal of cognitive dissonance on my part. So I feel like I have to compromise my mental intellect and intelligence and by being okay with 100% of this. And I'm not. That's just the reality of it. You know what I mean? Like, I think I told you I have like aunt and uncles and aunt and cousins, you know, who are gay and who are friends who are gay. Like there's nothing. I don't hate anybody from that community. And I will say this, like, do you think that I have hateful feelings like in me? I'll just ask you that.
No, but I do think you're in a state of cognitive dissonance.
Sure.
You said something a few minutes ago that was, I thought, I was on board with you with almost everything you said until the end. And then you said something to the effect of you would feel like you were sacrificing your mental, you know, your intelligence or whatever, if you were okay with all of that. But I think that's what puts you in the state of cognitive dissonance. The fact that you're not okay with all of that.
No, but I'm open and honest about that fact, though. I've never presented my faith as being flawless. I've never presented myself as being flawless. I still have tons of issues that are being worked out, and I have tons of questions about the Bible and stuff. So it's not as though
we like somebody like me would have questions for someone like you, because the first obvious question is, why do you follow something that you don't agree with or that you don't think is right? Why would you follow a moral idea that you yourself recognize as immoral? That doesn't make any sense, you know?
Well, okay, so you said recognize or as a moral. I'm going to say this. I'll give an analogy, but let's just say you ever seen those ants, how they make their communities underground? And they have like these elaborate highways and stuff. And
I've seen how they make communities in my house, unfortunately, and I'm trying to find ways to overcome that. But yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah, so they pump in concrete and they can see all of these elaborate like cities that they've built. But the thing is, if you were to go and talk to like an ant and you show them like a skyscraper and an ant could talk, they might say something like, "That's ridiculous. You should be building underground, because of the fact that predators can come knock over your house. And also, whenever you use still, you can't really bite on the still as much. Like you should be using dirt and twigs or whatever." They might think about something in a completely different way because our intelligence wouldn't compute into their mind. You know, if you try to teach them trigonometry or something like that, it maybe just wouldn't compute. So the fact that not everything doesn't make sense about the Bible to me doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense. You know, like the Trinity, it doesn't make sense to me. It's illogical, but that doesn't mean that it's not true. You and I discussed this. So I don't really see a disconnect.
It does. If it's not logical, it's not true.
Okay. So I don't want to go. You and I already had that discussion.
Okay.
And I told you why I believe the Trinity is real. But
you can, that's fine. You can believe that it's real, but I'm making the statement about logic. When you say that just because something's not logical doesn't mean it's not true, that's incorrect.
So I don't want to get caught up on that issue right now. We could have, you want to have an epistemology talk, we can have that talk. All I'm trying to say is that there are some things that maybe don't make sense to me, that maybe just if I had more information would make total sense. here's an example. If you saw me push a kid into traffic, you would assume that that's a bad act, you know?
I wouldn't assume.
You would assume. But if you were to see the other side, that like maybe like a semi was about to hit the kid, or there was a sniper, someone who's trying to shoot him, and I saved their life. When you have more information, that makes more sense. So I don't know. I will say this in my own personal evaluation, it doesn't make sense why God really should care about that one way or the other. Like, it seems like if you were just going by Isaiah's personal like knee-jerk reaction, it would seem like love would be the most important thing, whether it's with the guy or with the woman. And that's just my own personal evaluation. Now, I may be wrong on that, but you know what I mean? Maybe I don't have information that would change my mind right now.
Do we make moral decisions based on the information that we have, or based on information that we don't have? Which one is more reasonable?
The information we have.
Correct. So why would you not base your morality on the information you have? Why would you appeal to information that you may not know that could be different than what you have right now?
Because, Bryce, when we start to have these discussions, and for me, I'm already assuming that God exists. So it doesn't matter what I personally think or find logical or irrational, or the geometry, for example, of a 3D universe. If you start going up to 10 different, dimensions, maybe the things I think about reality just totally wouldn't make any remote sense. Or if you took me down to the quantum level or something like that.
But you assume more than that. You're not just assuming God exists. You're assuming that God exists. You're assuming that it's a specific God. You're assuming that its wishes are accurately represented in the Bible, that you have an accurate interpretation of them.
Yeah.
You're assuming a lot of things. You're assuming like 10 different things to arrive at.
I do. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So it's like, that's a lot of assumptions.
Yes, that's true. I'm just trying to explain to you that I don't have to have a hateful view of you or any member of the community to, say I disagree with one part of your life. There might be literally 50 other parts of your life that I love and like about you. It's like maybe your atheism, maybe I might meet you, maybe you might be like a straight guy and you're an atheist. Hey, maybe I might love 50 other things about you, that maybe we'd get along in 50 other things. I understand the maybe being gay or bi is probably a really big part of your life, or if you were trans. And so I can understand in principle if I were to say, hey, I don't believe that you're X, Y, and Z, or you, that this is, I don't agree with you being in a gay marriage. But I can understand why you would say, okay, well, I'm done with you at that point. Like, if you're going to deny something very fundamental about me, I'm done with you. But the reality is that you do the same thing for me. You deny a very fundamental part, the most important thing in my heart, which is Jesus Christ. And I'm okay with that because you have freedom to do whatever you want. So
that's not equal. Denying the existence of Jesus Christ is not the same as you not liking an aspect of someone else. Like, whether Jesus Christ is real or not doesn't have anything to do with how I feel about you. That's just how I feel about an idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But when you say that you don't like specific aspects of a person, like their sexual orientation, that's completely different, because that's about them. That's not about some abstract idea that may or may not be true. Well, I don't believe that there's a Jesus Christ to get saved, but if other people do, that's fine. I don't feel that they're immoral people for believing that. I don't feel that they're sinners. I wouldn't say that they're going to hell. That's not the same as you. Whereas if you feel that someone is a homosexual, you're calling them a sinner. That's about that person, right?
Well, everyone's sinner. That's like saying you're a human. Well, every person is a human.
Okay, well then what's the point of even bringing that up? Like, why even bring up that they're homosexual? If everyone is a sinner and everyone is equal, then who cares if someone is gay, straight? Like, why is this even an issue? Trans, it doesn't matter because everybody's a sinner. So what difference does it make?
Yeah, absolutely. And Bryce, I can tell you this with as clear as face as possibly I can. I don't think Isaiah Perez is 0.01% better than Brycearonee. Not even 0.0. I may be even worse off because I don't live even according to the things that I profess to believe in. So maybe you might live inside of the realm of your views more consistently, but that's just the truth. And if I'm being honest, I'm a hypocrite. I am dishonest and sometimes in representing my faith. And I'll be totally honest, there's elements of it that cause me cognitive dissonance. I mean, I'm not going to lie and say I have a perfect faith, but it's an honest faith. You know what I mean? I'd rather be honest than sit here and to try to make things up. But you know what? That went a little bit longer than I thought. So why don't we go ahead and get into these questions?
I did want to say one more thing. It's a suggestion. Yeah. I think that maybe in the future, we shouldn't talk about this in terms of hate, because you use that word a lot and you keep asking whether I think you're hateful, or you keep making statements like, I'm not hateful because of this. And I haven't accused you of being hateful, and I don't think that you are. And I think that that's kind of tangential from the issue. I don't think it's about whether you're hateful or not. People can be homophobic or transphobic without being hateful. Just because you're homophobic or transphobic doesn't mean that you're necessarily hateful. You can be both, but they're not.
Okay, touche. So then I'll just ask you flat out, do you think that I'm homophobic?
Yes, because you just told me that you were. You didn't use those words, but if your position is that homosexuality is a sin and that homosexuals are sinners because they're homosexuals, that is an aversion to homosexuality, which is the definition of homophobia.
Okay, so by your definition, I'm also transphobic then?
If your position is the same, if you think that they're sinners for being transgender, I don't know where it says that in the Bible, but if that's what your position, I never said that. Okay, I don't know. So then I don't know. But my point is, if you have an aversion to transgender people or some resistance to the idea that they should be called whatever they want to be called or whatever the case may be, then I would say yes. It doesn't necessarily mean you're hateful. That would depend on your reasons and to what extent you do it. But
so I just want to gauge your level of your own cognitive dissonance or your own hypocrisy. But are you Christophobic or religiphobic, godophobic?
I am an anti-theist, if that's what you're asking.
Oh, yes. So, yes, I wouldn't call myself an anti-LGBTQ.
No. I'm not against Christians, but I'm against what the theology is. I'm anti-Christian theology.
So then you're anti. Okay, so then you are Christophobic. Just that's fine.
If that's how you're defining that.
Okay, yes. That's fine. All right. At least you're admitting it right now. That's fine. That's okay. But anyway, the first question is: do you think that attractions are changeable?
Yes and no. So it's it kind of depends on what you mean. I think that for some people, sexual orientation is fluid, meaning that it can change naturally over time. For example, mine changes all the time, right? I identify as bisexual, but sometimes I'm straight, sometimes I'm gay. So I'm not always the same from one moment to the next. So it's fluid that way. However, I don't think that that's true for everyone. And we know, I think the question you're asking, I don't know for sure, but if you're asking, can we change someone else's sexuality? The answer is no. So I don't even think you can actively change your own sexuality.
Yeah. So this is a problem that I have. Speaking of like what causes me cognitive dissonance, because a lot of the gay people who I've met, they'll tell me that they were born gay, and I tend to believe them. So if someone is born now, like I'm bald, what if you told me I hate bald people? You know what I mean? Or I think being bald is bad. It's like, well, what could I do to possibly change that? You know what I mean? If you tell me like I don't have a desire to have sex like with a male, that doesn't exist inside of me. But if you said, hey, Isaiah, you need to be gay, or we're gonna torture you, or whatever, or we're gonna torture you until you turn gay, like in 1984, if you were to try to do some kind of reprogramming of my mind, I don't think I would be able to do that. Now, I might be in a gay marriage. I might have sex with a guy, but that's not going to change my actual attraction, which is to females. So if I evaluate that and I say, that doesn't really make sense to judge someone if they're born this way. You know what I mean? It just doesn't. I can't wrap my mind around that. So now that may or may not be the case, but if it is, because I know different people wind up becoming gay later on, like my aunt wind up becoming gay like in her 30s, but after she got out of her marriage. But so people can change for different reasons, or maybe they suppress it, or maybe they discover it. You were telling me that you were discovered. I have a good Christian pastor friend who told me he discovered, like in his 30s, that he was actually bisexual. And he told me that I don't act on this. We have a wife and family and everything, but so I can understand, you know what I mean? Like if I was being judged for being straight, what am I going to do? Like, I can't really change that, Does that make sense?
I mean, I guess you were conflating a couple of different ideas together, because I wasn't really addressing the judgment part. The answer to your question, can people change their sexual orientation? I believe the answer is no. I do think sexual orientation can change for some people, but you can't change it. You can't change yours. You can't change someone else's. It's a natural thing that, and I also think it's a process of discovery. I think people are inclined to identify a certain way because they don't really have a, experience or understanding to do otherwise. As far as the idea of people being born gay, I don't agree with that. I don't think that people are born gay. I don't think that people are born straight either. I don't think that
socialized.
No, it's not. It's probably biologically influenced as well as environmental. We don't know what the factors are that lead to sexual orientation, but the thing is, it's a process of discovery. When you ever hear someone, as an LGBT person, I've often been asked, when did you decide to become gay? Right? Now I'm glad you recognize that that's a ridiculous question, but I always flip it back on them. When did you decide to become straight? You know what most of them tell me? Well, I've always been straight. Have you? Have you though? Were you straight when you were a 5-year-old on the playground? No,
because at that age you hate girls. That's ironic, right? Everyone, they don't want to get cooties.
Yeah. So you usually identify with your own gender at that time, and you discover at some point, usually around puberty, that I think she's pretty, or if you're, I think he's cute, or whatever the case may be. But sexuality is a process of discovery. You weren't born anything. You figure that out. That may be influenced by biological factors and environmental to some extent. But the point is, for me, none of this matters, because it doesn't matter if it's biological. It doesn't matter if it's environmental. It doesn't matter if you were born that way. It doesn't matter even if you could decide to change. None of that matters with how people are to be treated or what rights that there's.
Right. I agree there.
Like that, right?
Yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah, so I almost don't care. Like, this is something I don't even really care about, whether people are born gay or whether it can be changed, because the point is, it doesn't matter. Sexual orientation, gender identity, none of that matters to me.
But Bryce, the reason why this is important, maybe it's not important to you, but I think it would be really important for your average, evangelical, to try to understand from the perspective of a gay person or trans person, if they feel like they were born in the wrong body, or they genuinely feel like they do a scan or whatever of their brain, and they genuinely do look more like someone from the opposite sex. You inverted that argument and what if you were being told that you were a female, in the last conversation? That would suck, man. That would suck if you're going to tell me I would have to go around walking around in a dress and high heels and wear makeup and stuff. I totally get that. Are you
an evangelical, by the way?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
No.
So, because you brought them up a couple of times, and I'm just wondering, do you think that that's something an evangelicals interested in? Do you think they're interested in trying to understand the perspective of LGBT people? I don't think that they are. I don't think that's fits in with evangelicalism.
Well, the thing is, though, recently, because more people have came out of the closet, most people know someone or are related to someone who's gay. So that makes you confront it face to face, because we are going to talk here very shortly about, like, if your daughter, or if my daughter was gay or trans, whatever, your advice to someone who is a parent of that community. And if that is the case, I know there's some people who would like just kick them out. I have a hard time to understand that, because my daughter could be taking my life, and the last words I would tell her was that having her was the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I wouldn't regret a moment of it. So I couldn't understand for the life of me any parent who could do that to their kid. Just, it's mind boggling. I mean, I would sell all my limbs on the black market to protect my daughter,
So what does an evangelical person have to do? What are their options at that point? It would either be change their religion,
mm-hmm.
or carry on with their religion and abandon their kid.
No, I don't see it. I mean, well, you know what? Let's save the rest of that talk.
Okay,
that one for,
but that's what I meant earlier when I said change your religion.
Okay, well, let's go on to the next question. But this is, I do want to ask you this question. I want to give a little bit of context. But are people looking for ways to get added into the LGBT Rainbow Plus community? And I do want to ask you something. Are you familiar with Matt Walsh?
I don't know, but I'm terrible with names. So
he's a Christian talk show guy. He has a beard, and he actually just wrote a book called like Johnny the Walrus or something like that.
Okay, no, I'm just gonna go with no, because
okay.
It doesn't sound familiar.
So in this story, I guess it's like an anti-trans book for kids, but it's called Johnny the Walrus or something like that, about a kid who wants to become a walrus. But he does evaluate like other things, like on TikTok, with people who it seems like they're like literally, and I'm just telling you what this appears like. It seems like they're just creating like new sexual orientations. Like they go into really in-depth detail of being, well, I'm this, I'm pan, but I'm not bi, but then I'm attracted to this, and I'm only attracted to cis. I mean, it's just all kinds of different things. I mean, I miss the old days where it's just like people understood it really easy. It's like you're gay, straight, or bi. Like that's really easy to understand. But then there's all kinds of other, there's all kinds of other things that they just keep adding. Like one of them was like Chris Kimono's daughter came out as like demisexual, which is, I guess, only being attracted to people emotionally.
So can I ask a question?
Let me finish, and then I'll let you get in here. But then there's like this, I don't know, I cannot remember the name. It might be the I or an A, but it might be like allisexual or something like that, where you're attracted to people's intellect. And I will tell you this, you're probably gonna get creeped out by this, but I totally love Judge Judy, and I've been attracted to her for like 20 years. And it's not entirely a physical attraction, but it is more that I'm attracted to her mind, because I think she's so brilliant. So I can understand how that could be in your mind and overweigh other parts of just a direct physical attraction to someone. I'm not sure if I told you this, but the girl who I dated, I didn't date her, but she went on the mission field and she got bit by a snake and she died. And she was the plainest. I mean, I hate to put on a scale, but she'd probably be like a 5 on a scale. But I was so attracted to like her inner person that she was like a 20 for me, because she was just such a kind and gentle person. And so I can understand how that it could be a little bit like, there's a little bit, it's not just directly, everything is just completely directly, but it seems like people want to be involved in that. So they're kind of just making up new things. What are your thoughts on that?
Are you asking me about people who are questioning their sexuality, or are you talking about some organization with a nefarious agenda?
No, I'm not talking about nefarious. There's no nefarious here. It's just.
Are you talking about people, or are you talking about a group or an organization?
People, just people.
Individuals? If you're talking about individuals, then I wouldn't say that they're looking for ways to join the LGBTQ community. I think that if they are sexually queer or gender queer, then they're in the community already. like I said, sexuality is it's a process of discovery, right? So as humans discover more about sexuality, we tend to create new labels to accurately describe people and their sexual or gender disposition. So, the LGBTQ rainbow is more about recognizing how people are and not so much about creating new categories of people. So I think maybe you're looking at it the wrong way. I think that people are recognizing certain things about themselves that are different from the expected norm. And now that if they feel liberated to say that, they want to be recognized as that. I think that they probably already consider themselves queer in some way and maybe just don't know what their label is because it's a process of discovery.
So maybe I didn't make that totally clear, but let's just say I am straight and then I wanted to say that I was like demisexual. I might want to say, because I don't want to feel excluded from this LGBT plus community, I might want like a D added in there. Or
so the debate,
or like the mental, I can understand because I have seen that on an LGBT plus person's profile, and I didn't even know what it was. I believe it's like, actually, I don't even know. It's whenever you're attracted to someone mentally, and but anyway, I could see that if they want to be included into this, but they themselves are straight, but they're looking for some other kind of avenue or something. What are your thoughts?
There is a debate about what ought to be included into the LGBTQ plus community and, what labels and letters. And there are certain things in there that I disagree with, for example, like K for Kinks, right? That's something that I find questionable because almost everybody has kinks. They're like so many different ones. So if we include that, we're basically including everybody. And that wouldn't be a problem in and of itself. But the purpose of LGBTQ plus community and identification is to provide safe spaces for marginalized communities. Mm-hmm. And not everyone who has a label is marginalized, right? You're not necessarily a member of a marginalized community just because you have a foot fetish or you like BDSM or you like to record videos or whatever. That's something that people don't say you are somebody who shouldn't have bathroom rights or you're someone who shouldn't be able to adopt children or get married. No one's doing that. And so I think that the whole point of it gets lost if you start adding people in there who aren't really part of marginalized communities. But there are other people who are part of marginalized communities that may not be included. So I'm not against adding new labels like N for non-binary. There are people who don't identify as a particular gender and they are discriminated because of it.
Okay. I was going to say, I guess that wouldn't necessarily have to do with sexuality, but I guess it has to do with sexuality because either way, it
has to do with gender expression.
Okay.
Right. And we include transgender in LGBTQ. So because they're part of a marginalized community, they may be the most marginalized community.
Yeah, they really are. And I do want to talk to you. We will talk about that because I do believe that we need to be more sensitive while having these talks. And so I do want to ask you if there's a way I can be more sensitive about that, because like I said, at the end of the day, it's like these people's lives are in jeopardy and they're being abused. And, I've told you I'm very against the abuse of hate speech that goes out against them. But on the other hand, we just got to understand this is a talk that you and I can have over the internet. But at the end of the day, it's like people's lives are at stake and people's self-esteem and self-worth are up for grabs, And so regardless of where we can make philosophical arguments one way or the other, it's like actual lives are at stake. So I do want to be a bit better of having these conversations, or maybe just not having them at all. I'll have to ask you if you think that I've done more damage or not. But we'll save that as we go along here. I do want to write that down because we can discuss that one. But what advice do you have for a parent of a gay or trans person?
So recognize that none of my parental advice comes from a place of experience because I don't have kids.
You have a cat.
Right? So I have a cat and a dog, so I don't have kids, like I said,
Mhm.
right? So take any
You have
and
a fur
all
baby.
parental advice coming from me with a grain of salt.
Mhm, mhm.
But my advice would be general advice and not really specific to parents of gay or trans kids that wouldn't
Mhm.
apply to straight kids. So maybe you should ask me maybe a more specific question that relates to trans identity or gay identity. Like, I'm not really sure what, um, you know, what type of advice a parent would need just because they happen to have a kid who is trans or gay.
Well, I just will say this. I mean,
Like, if they ask me, hey, my kid, I think he's gay, what should I do? I'm going to be like,
love them.
does he have enough food? And, does he have, clothes to go to school? Are you making sure his homework's okay? Does he have friends? Like, basic
For
stuff
basic
that doesn't really
education.
apply to someone, that doesn't really speak to their sexual orientation. I would need maybe like a more specific thing that you're asking me. Like, I don't know
No,
beyond
that's
general
that's enough.
advice.
That's all you got to say right there. Is just, I mean, this brings a lot of pain to discuss this because you talk about cognitive dissonance, and I know I could read the Bible and say there is nothing in there that could make me feel 1% less about my daughter. Um, I really wish, hopefully, someday you're able to have that experience, Bryce, because there's just nothing like it in the universe. But it's yeah. If people are reading the book that I believe in and the religion that I believe in and see it as a license to abuse their own kids, I just, yeah, I really don't want anything to do with that personally. I can tell you from my own personal experience, my daughter could be the worst serial killer that's ever existed, and it couldn't make me love her 1 ounce less. If my daughter would have died tomorrow, Mother's Day, the love that I have for her would continue till the day I died. I still love my mom. I still think about my mom, and I loved my mom more than I loved anyone else on the planet. And all the love I had for my mom would fill in like the pinky tip of my daughter.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, good.
And I don't want you to answer it. I just want you to listen to the question
Okay.
and consider it, and you can answer it at a future time. But the question is this, and it's meant to get you to try to think of things from an evangelical's perspective, the people you say that have done harm in the name of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Who is more important to you? Which is more important to you? Your love for your daughter or your love for Jesus Christ? That's the first part of the question. And then the second part of the question is, which one do you think is consistent with what Scripture actually teaches? Now, don't answer that,
Mm-hmm.
but I can tell you what the answer would be for an evangelical because I've asked many evangelicals. And the scriptural answer is Jesus Christ. So this explains how they can feel totally comfortable. And I'm not saying that every evangelical would abandon their gay kid or trans kid or whatever. That's a gross generalization. But for the ones who do, that's how they rationalize it, because to them,
Yeah.
that's perfectly consistent with what Scripture says they ought to be doing. Jesus literally said, do not think that I've come to bring peace. I came to bring the sword. Your enemies will be in your own household. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. So that's their interpretation from what's written in the book. So I don't want you to answer, but just consider that when you talk about like when I say that people, if you want to claim that, if you want to get people to not abandon their kids because they're gay and all that, and also be evangelical, they may not be able to do both of those things at the same time. They have to abandon one or the other.
So I recently saw like a really interesting like bio on someone who was like trans in the army. I think they're in the army. It's some military branch, and I'm not going to call this ironic. But they were actually married to. So it was a trans man, and he was married to a trans woman.
Senior Airman Logan Ireland, United
What?
States Air Force.
What was that?
Senior Airman Logan Ireland of the United States Air Force.
Well, I don't know which one it is.
That's who it was. I can tell you because I know
there might be, but there might be multiple stories, whatever. But anyway,
that's the one that's publicized. So I 9 times out of 10, I bet you $1 million that's the one that you're talking about. But go on.
Okay. Anyway, whoever the person is, whoever that person might be, they interviewed their parents, and the parents said, God, I didn't realize it's going to get so emotional because now I'm going to talk about something with my daughter. But
well, do you want to go ahead and finish out the questions and come back?
Yeah, I am, because the person said that I thought that I was going to have like a straight son. He says like instead I turned out to have like a gay daughter, something along those lines. And I will say this, like when my daughter was, when we went to find out the gender of my daughter, or the sex, I don't know, whatever you want to say, maybe you'd call it just the sex, but we went to find out the sex of my daughter. I had known in my spirit that I was going to have I just felt it like in the inside of my guts that I was going to have a male. And as a Mexican, like male, it's a really big thing to have like a male. It's not even nearly as much it is in South Korea. I mean, it's worse. The misogyny is much worse in South Korea. But when the doctor told me that I was going to have a girl, I just felt like my soul just dropped down. I mean, I was so disappointed, and I sat there. I had to put on this really big fake smile for my wife because I had to pretend that I was happy about that, you know?
Isaiah, have you ever told this story before?
Yeah, I have. And
okay.
No, I'm not. This story is not going the direction that you think it is. It's going to the story of me overcoming my prejudices, because having a daughter now has been the most wonderful and amazing experience of my life. I think I could probably have another 10 daughters before I'd want to have one son, you know. But if she were to become trans or discover she was trans, whatever you want to say, I can't imagine that would make me love her even 0.0% more or less, you know. Like, I don't think I could love my daughter anymore. So
you're a changed man.
I'm a work in progress, you know. Like, what really kills me about,
in some aspects for the better.
Yeah, for sure. What really kills me about members of your community is that they don't understand that, like, I'm making sincere, honest efforts to try to understand people and to try to maybe change the way I've changed my way I've thought on so many different issues, considering on the LGBT plus issues, by having extended talk to people. So I do want to, like, you said something that just stuck a knife right into my soul. I mean, you injured something. You injured something inside of me, like hardcore. Because when I came on the Bryce is Wrong show on, sorry, I'm not going to let you live that down. But I just called it Brycearonee, so I didn't have to call it right or wrong. But whenever I came on your show, I was talking to you about my interest of wanting to protect my daughter, you know, wanting to provide avenues where everyone's taken care of. But I expressed an interest for my daughter. And you said, in the future, you should think about how people feel genuinely, the parents who feel like they're looking out for their daughters as well. You know, a daughter of a trans person, a parent of a trans person. So you like slapped my face. Like, that hurt, dude. That really hurt.
So
sorry.
Was it good advice or bad advice?
Bryce, get in here because I'm hurting it. Good.
Well, I was asking, was it a good thing that I said, or was it a bad thing?
Bryce, just talk away, man. In fact, I need to get some water right now. So if you can expand on that, I'm going to take myself off the screen because I'm like I'm having a bit of a nervous flash here.
All right. Well, I will.
And it's your fault because you're the one that hit me with that question, man. It's all this. I'm blaming Bryce. The Bryce is definitely wrong right now. So I got to get some water. And I'll be right back in 2 seconds. So please, if you want to expand on that or expand on the actual question, please.
Which question am I expanding on?
Oh, now you're bringing me back.
Yeah.
Well, just anything I was saying or what might be, advice for a gay or trans parent.
Sure. So, like I said, it's difficult for me to answer this kind of a question without more of a specific example, because I think I don't think there's any special advice that children who are gay or trans need until it starts becoming an issue with other people. If it's this issue with like bullying or homophobia or whatever. The first thing that I would say is, if you are a conservative parent who may be coming from a religious perspective and you discover your kid is any LGBT, something other than straight, then don't try to change them into being straight, because it's not going to work. It's going to fail, and you're just going to create a lot of pain, heartache, and suffering. You're going to damage your relationship with that person. You're going to create a lot of trauma in that child. And you know what? If Jesus is more important to you than your child, then you're a shitty parent. And sorry for saying that again, but Isaiah's not here, so
I am. I just caught you.
Well, it's too late. But yeah, just like let your kids be whoever they are going to be. If they're not hurting other people and they're not hurting themselves, then stop trying to change them into your model of the perfect kid that you want them. They are a person. They're going to be their own person. And if they happen to be gay, straight, bisexual, transgender, whatever, that's who they are. It's not your responsibility to force them to being something that they're not. Your job as a parent is to make them law-abiding, upstanding citizens so that they can be effective members of their community. And that's it. Give them the tools, the training, give them a house over their head, shoes, clothes, love. And that's it.
Yeah. Okay. So getting into the next question, do you consider misgendering hate speech, or do you consider that like to be a passive aggressive hate speech? Hate speech?
If generally speaking, if it's intentional, yes. If it's unintentional, no. So I looked up the definition of hate speech in anticipation of this question, and hate speech is any form of expression through which speakers intend to vilify, humiliate, or incite hatred against a group or a class of people based on race, religion, sexual orientation, etc. So if your intention is to do that, then yes, by definition, it would be hate speech. If you're doing it accidentally, then I would say no.
Yeah, well, that happens. So I do want to jump on this real quick, though. I will ask you this. Do you believe that people in your community, the atheist community, do you believe that they, by that definition, then they commit hate speech against people of faith?
Some of them can.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I don't think that all of them do that, but I think that some of them do.
That's fair. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Not particularly, but
okay.
I mean, I don't plan on calling people out, directly, but it's the same. Anyone of any demographic can initiate hate speech against someone of a different demographic, right? It happens with atheists, it happens with theists, it happens with Christians, it happens with Muslims. So yeah, I don't think we need to go into like calling specific people out or anything.
That's fine. I just I do think it's a bit weird. We mentioned the dead naming, and it seems like people in your community would be perfectly okay to dead name a Muslim and who's changed their name, and they don't see any kind of expression. They don't see any kind of connection between dead naming a Muslim or a trans person, you know. And so, like, let's just be across the board straight with everyone. If you consider that to be hate speech, then let's just apply it equally, you know. Do you agree with that?
I mean, I kind of already answered that in the last question, but
do you agree that it's hate? Do you agree that it's hate speech, though?
I think I just answered that. I said I defined what hate speech was, and I said there are people from all demographics who can use hateful speech towards anyone else. So that includes atheists, Muslims, Jews, Christians, everyone.
You would consider dead naming a hate speech, though?
If it's intentional.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's intentional and the person's name is a part of their religious identity and the person doing it knows that, then yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So
what I don't agree with is your categorization. What I think what you're trying to do is categorize atheists as being likely to do that, because you keep giving this specific charge to that community. I can't answer for the community. I'm an atheist and I don't do that, right? So I can't speak for anybody else.
Well, okay, so I know you're not, you know, you're I don't want to make like a category error, hasty generalization, but it seems like everything that atheists like get upset about religious folks, like they do the same exact thing, but with different.
But do I do the same things that I get upset about other people?
I mean, but you know, I find I find you to be a big exception. You know,
but the thing is, I can only answer for me. I can't answer for other people in the atheist community. I can't answer for other people in the LGBT community. You're asking me these questions about these people in the community who do that, but that has nothing to do with me, right? Clearly, not all of us do that if I don't do that. So maybe stop generalizing us as being hypocrites.
Okay,
maybe
so
some of us aren't.
So I'll make a more general statement. The same kind of, okay, so here's the way I can phrase this. The same kind of thing that upsets atheists about believers, there's people in the community who will do the same exact kind of thing, but it will be justified because they're a member of that community. You can call that being tribalistic, because I think everyone's going to be guilty of that, you know. But for me, it's like, it doesn't matter if you're Christian or not, if you're committing hate speech, if you're, you know, if you're trying to be abusive to that community, like, I'm going to stand up and say, this is not right. So I have done that. I'm on the record for doing that. And I just would like to see more people in that community actually calling it out, because I think that's part of the problem, is that whenever you might personally think that it's wrong, but if you don't, and I'm not talking about you, I'm just saying in general, if you don't call it out, it's like tacit approval, you know? So
there you go. Maybe one of them who are watching will consider your advice. I don't know how that applies to me, though.
Yeah. Well, so going on to the next question, I got to say this, that probably from the age of 16, I went through some really, really, really bad, dark depression that was absolutely horrific. Bryce, I can tell you this, that I used to tape out my windows with black, like to where literally no light could come into my room. Like, you literally couldn't see my hand in front of my face. And kind of something I never forgave my parents about was just like not really picking up on this depression that I was going through, because I would spend hours and hours in my room just crying, like, on a weekly basis. Then I would have to go to church. I'd have to go into the bathroom, wash my face off with cold water, and then go to church and present myself as being the minister's son, this picture perfect person. And that caused a lot of like identity issues in my life. The point being is that I suffered from some really bad depression and suicidal thoughts. Like, suicide was the only way I ever saw my life as ending. I didn't see any other scenario in which I could live a normal life and have like a wife and family and stuff like that, or have a normal life. And actually those feelings still plague me a lot of times, like feelings of inadequacy and such. But so I really relate a lot to people who feel suicidal or depressed. It triggers a lot of empathy in my life, And so one of the reasons why we do support the anti-bullying for the LGBT plus community is because a lot of these people, maybe from the abuse they get from their parents or family, like commit suicide, Sorry. So I do want to ask is, why does transitioning, or why doesn't transitioning help suicide rates? Or why in general do you think that trans people, or maybe even LGBT people are suicidal?
Why do I think that they're suicidal?
Yeah.
So I don't know the stats. I haven't looked into any specific studies other than the general. I am aware that people who come from an LGBTQ background have higher rates of suicidal ideation than those that don't. But I think the question you asked was, why doesn't transitioning help?
Yeah, that, and then also if you could just touch on why you think there is just a high rate in general.
Well, there could be are we talking about for transgender people or for other LGBT people? Because my answer might be different.
I'm sorry. I know you don't like conflating things. I probably do too much conflation for you.
The question you gave me that I thought that you initially gave me was, why doesn't transitioning help suicide rate? So I interpreted that as being talking about transgender people. So I can talk about that, and then I can
okay. Let's talk about that one first.
So right off the cuff, I would assume, without looking anything up and just going off of like that statistic which you just gave me, I'm taking it at face value. I would assume that people who are transgender are just as likely to face discrimination, marginalization, abuse, and trauma, whether they've transitioned or not. In fact, they probably experience a greater level.
I would totally think more, just for the record.
You would think what?
I would totally think they would experience it more.
Okay, I tend to agree. I was about to say they probably experience it too.
Because then you're out in the open, people have the opportunity to go after you. Whereas in before, you're just internalizing it. It's out in the open. So I'm sorry, I will let you get back here, but because I would think, and I don't know, this is just a hypothetical situation, that if it was less stigmatized, that you could transition, or it's possible to transition, like that would help the person who's maybe thinking about killing themselves. Like, okay, I could come out and I could do this. And actually, I want to put this down. I do want to let you get back to that, but I am going to ask you afterwards about Biden and his appointment, because he did appoint the first like lesbian and trans person, and so I do want to speak on whether or not that's good for the people in the community to see people like in leadership and whatnot. But please continue with that, and we'll get back to that one.
So, your question about suicide, the most important rule in inferential statistics is that correlation does not imply causation, right? So we don't know why suicide rates are higher among transgender people, but it can be reasonably inferred that it might be based on a number of different factors, including but not limited to gender dysphoria, body dysmorphic disorder, external pressures to conform, inability to transition, difficulty with the transitioning process, emotional, physical, sexual abuse that they're more likely to face, rejection by family, discrimination, all of these things. There's a lot of different factors there that could potentially lead someone to anxiety, depression, possibly leading to alcoholism or drug abuse as a coping mechanism and leading to suicidal ideation. We don't know. So, everyone leads a different life and everyone has different life circumstances. So, we don't know which one or which several of these things caused any specific person to commit suicide. So we can't assume that because they transition, they're either more likely or less likely to die by suicide when we don't know all the factors. So I think we should just be careful about making those kind of assumptions, because your question kind of assumes that, well, it's because they are subjected to more discrimination. It could be that, or it could be something else, or it could be a combination of things. We don't have enough information. So I would say that there are enough things there to justify, the results that we see, that suicidal ideation is higher, because there's so many more things that could compel someone to be led into anxiety and depression, but we don't know which, if any.
But would you definitely think that the reaction of like society in general contributes to that, though? Like, would that be a correlation you think would be logical?
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the factors I mentioned. I mentioned external pressure to conform, and that external pressure comes from society. It could come from family. Rejection by society and family is one of the things that can have an effect on someone's mental health and their mental outlook. Transgender people and gay people get rejected by family. Sometimes they get rejected by society. So, but not all of them do,
Right.
And the ones that don't might still commit suicide for other reasons,
Right. They could just go through some financial crisis, whatever. But that would be interesting. I would definitely like those kind of like sociologists to compile those kind of statistics, because people genuinely need to see the end game of how they're behaving. They need to see it firsthand that, hey, this has real world consequences. These people need our love and help. For whatever you might think about me, I would never, not help a trans or gay or bi or whatever person. If they needed my help, beyond any doubt, I would be there to help them out, So, but anyway, I just think that maybe because I've gone through that, I've gone through the body dysmorphia and BID. And so if you've gone through that, you totally understand what people's behavior and attitude towards you makes you feel like, because like whenever I was in high school, I went to a Christian high school, and I was what you'd call like metrosexual. It wasn't really a word for that, but like even to this day, I like to take care of my nails and, my skin and whatnot, my feet, and, I'll do this 7-step like thing on my nails and stuff, but I like pink, but 20, 30 years ago, like that wasn't socially acceptable. So if I was expressing myself the way like that, my mom just took it as me being gay. Everyone just thought I was gay. And so whenever I was at this high school, people like these girls thought it was so funny to like run away from me, like, and to call me a freak. And that like hurt. Oh my God, that hurt beyond any words that I could explain, So I just know the actual consequences of that. So it makes me want to be more sensitive and to try to mitigate the damage that I've done. And maybe just to try to just say I should just not engage in these talks at all, because I thought, I'll just give you my own personal opinion. I thought that I was doing a good job to try to say, hey, we can sit down and discuss something and have an honest to God disagreement on things and still say that, hey, I might disagree with one thing about you, Bryce, but I still love you. I still care about you. But if I answer some questions honestly, I think I have the potential to like really hurt some people and really get them angry at me. So I didn't set out, like, I didn't start this podcast like, hey, let's piss off a bunch of people, you know, let's get a bunch of people angry at me. Let's get a bunch of people trolling me. Like I was just trolled this last week by a bunch of atheists. But you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I just think maybe to mitigate damage, maybe I should just take myself out of the conversation, because I thought as a moderate person, I could help people in both sides, you know, evangelicals who are really anti this issue. I thought I could help them to try to have a more moderate position, you know, but I pissed them off. I pissed the moderates off. I mean, I pissed off the evangelicals, and I pissed the atheists off to a much higher degree.
So we talked about this a little bit before the show. I don't know how much you want me to expand on that, but I told you my position on moderates, right? I used to consider myself a moderate, a political moderate, back when I was a atheist. But now I don't. I consider myself a progressive, and I know what being progressive means on most issues, and I know what being conservative means on most issues. I don't know what anybody stands for when they tell me that they are a moderate without having like some sort of, you know, deep conversation, because moderate, they could be progressive on some issues and conservative on others. It would depend on what issues they are conservative about that would determine how I interact with them and whether I think that they are, you know, can be reached. So when you say you say that you identify as a moderate, and you think that, you know, you want evangelicals to come to a moderate position, but I'm not aware of what a moderate position would be. To me, a moderate is somebody who's conservative on some things and liberal on others. So
yeah, well, there's that. I mean, there's that. It's just, it comes down to this, Bryce. Like, I don't know what you guys want out of me. It's like, hold on. Not you, but just the community. I've said I'm for these like rights. I've said I'm against hate speech. I've put my money where my taters are as far as that goes, literally speaking, because supporting this, we've put about $200 into that anti-LGBT thing. But it's like, you want me to be able to change my mind on a topic. I'm not speaking about you, but I'm just saying in general that like I can't physically change. If you're going to say that a gay person can't change whether or not they're gay or not, these things, it's like, it's not that I hate the people. It's just I have a conviction that I can't just like, okay, I'm just going to say that I accept this. I mean, I can say that, but that would seem really, really disingenuous on my part if I'm going to say, okay, I'll just say I agree with this. I'll just say I think this is okay, but it's just done to appease you.
I don't know what we're talking about. I don't know what specific, like, you're talking in generalities, but I don't know what specific issue you're talking about.
Because Bryce, you got upset. You got upset that I told you that I wouldn't attend your gay wedding, and I wouldn't do your gay wedding, and I wouldn't attend it. Okay. And it's like, that would be the equivalent of me telling you, hey, Bryce, I want you to come to my Jewish kid's circumcision or something like that. And you're like, well, this is something I'm personally against. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you rejected coming to my child's circumcision, you can just at least understand in principle why I wouldn't want to go to your gay wedding. It doesn't mean that It doesn't mean that I hate you. It doesn't mean that I think that people should be abusing you. And it doesn't mean that I want to stop you from doing that. But you're wanting me to accept everything about you. Like, you don't give two goddams what I think one way or the other. It's like, you accept my way of thinking or else, or I'm going to make and I'm not saying you in general, or I'm going to make your life a living hell. I'm going to troll you and Oz just doxed me, by the way, released my actual real name.
So the difference between those two examples is that I have specific reasons for why I wouldn't support the Jewish circumcision, because it has to do with harm, right? I consider that to be something that's harmful, and it's not something that I would celebrate. The reasons why you wouldn't attend a gay wedding have to do with your religious beliefs that gay people are sinners and, you know, evil, and or whatever the case may be.
No, I've never. Do not say that. I never said that, Brian. I've never said that.
You don't think gay people are sinners?
I think everybody. First of all, I think everybody's a sinner. I'm a sinner.
Is sin evil? Sin and evil is the same thing, right?
No, I wouldn't say. I mean, it. First of all, it would depend on the sin. One, but second of all,
does it?
No. So I've never said that. I never said that. I never would.
No, I'm asking you now for clarity. Are sin and evil two different things to you?
Are they two different things?
Yeah. You don't think that what's sinful is evil? If you don't, that's fine. I don't want to straw man you. I'm just trying to get clear, because to me, as a Christian, those are synonymous. Sin is like following the devil, which is evil. That's what I thought. Now, I don't know if you think that or not. But the point is, the point I'm trying to make is, if you think that, you don't have to answer right now because it looks like you don't want to. But if you think that, that's not equivalent to me, you know, to my position on someone doing a circumcision, because I think that is actually harmful, which is what I'm against. And we can prove that. Like, that's an objective thing.
You think that's actually evil?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think that they may not realize that they're doing something harmful, you know. And if that's the case, we have to consider intent and knowledge and all of that.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's not something I'm going to support because the action is harmful. That's the thing that's important to me.
But that's what I believe. That's what I believe, and we can agree to disagree on that point. But it's
not equal, though.
Okay, in your mind, it's not. In your mind, it's not. I'm telling you, and from my perspective, it is. You don't like the fact that I have a difference of opinion on this issue. You know, you don't like that. I mean, and I don't know what else I can tell you, Bryce. No,
it's not a
thing you right to do it, but I don't support.
I don't have a difference of I'm not against you because you have a difference of opinion. We're talking about if you invited me to go to your Jewish kid's circumcision. I wouldn't do that. That's not a difference of opinion. That's watching you do something that I think is morally wrong.
Evil.
Morally wrong. I'll just say morally wrong, right? Because evil is a loaded term and it's a religious term that I don't really.
It is, because I think there has to be some really malicious intent behind evil. So I would never call you evil. I would never use. Excuse me. I would never use that word. Like, I think Putin is evil. That's for sure.
Okay, we agree on that.
Kim Jong-un is evil. I would definitely say that, but definitely not Brycearonee. Here we go.
Okay,
all right. Monkey for Banana, I love you. I'm always gonna love you. You are a treasure in my heart, man. I've cried many times to that person. They made me cry quite a bit. So let's try to stream to these last two because it's at 1 hour and 30 bit. What do you wish that evangelicals knew about Plus members?
Science, I guess, is the short answer. I think that maybe it would be helpful if they took a human sexuality and gender course, or maybe critical theory, you know, try to get a critical assessment of society and the power structures and, you know, the things that cause people to. We talked about suicidal ideation and all that, and look at the harms that maybe their religious ideas cause. That would be helpful. The problem is that these suggestions that I'm giving, when you say, what do I wish evangelicals would know, they all come from liberal studies, which is something that evangelicals, who are typically very conservative, do not want to learn. So they tend to fear any kind of knowledge or information that doesn't come out of the Bible, right? So as soon as you start teaching them something that's contradictory to the Bible, they don't want to hear it, because if they learned the stuff, it would be worldview shattering. And, you know, I don't think you can be a fundamentalist evangelical and also be accepting of the LGBTQ community, because they're diametrically opposed. Anyone who says otherwise, I think, is being intellectually dishonest. That's what the doctrine is. So they would literally have to change fundamental aspects of their religious beliefs. And people just aren't willing to do that, because that's more important to them than conforming to society or worldly things, as scripture says. So they don't want to learn. But that's what I wish they would learn, because I think if you did learn, it would change your perspective. But I don't think that they want to learn that.
So okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't. As I said, I don't consider myself an evangelical. So
no, but you were more conservative before on this issue than you are now. You've said that you've changed your position based on conversations you've had with me, conversations you've had with other people. You've said that after you had a daughter, your position changed. You used to want a son, then you had a daughter, and now you can't imagine. So you are capable of changing, at least in some areas.
Sure.
Maybe you haven't changed in all of the areas, but people are resistant to change, and it takes life experiences sometimes to change them. Someone who actively goes out there and learns these things because they're curious, they want to know what is truth. They are genuinely curious about what someone else's position is, and because they are empathetic about their positions, will learn them. But if they're not, they won't. So
I agree with that, and I think one of the things that is very hurtful is because, okay, and I will give an analogy from this to be inside of my own Christian brothers, but feeling that I'm not progressing at the rate in which you would want me to, because whenever I first became a Christian, I was hanging around some people who were like more spiritual than me, and they was kind of like, oh, you're just this, you're just that, and you're not trying like hard, you're not trying to be led by the Spirit. And it was devastating, man. And I finally told the person, I said, you know what? He was like my overseer pastor, and I said, you know what? Because I just to give you some context, I went into like a men's rehabilitation center for guys who have drug and alcoholic issues, just so I could like focus on God for like 24/7. I didn't have a drug addiction, but anyway. And I said, you know what? I feel like I'm at the urinal. I'm trying to take a pee, and you're standing behind me and like, hey, you need to pee. Hurry up and pee right now. And because of the fact that you're like behind me, you're giving me like performance anxiety. And if you leave the bathroom, I'd probably be able to pee just fine. But the fact that you're standing behind me and looking at me, I can't pee. And I know that's a bad analogy, but
no, I get it. I think it's an analogy that works. I think it works for the Christian person. You were saying it was more spiritual.
Yeah, but I didn't want you to make the association that I'm saying that between bathroom rights. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to go down that route. But the point is that I feel like Oz is like, oh, I say you need to pee right now, and you need to understand everything right here. And I'm like, dude, I'm trying to understand. I've engaged in, this is now my 5th talk with you offline. I've engaged with 20 hours of talks with LGBT community. I've really learned a lot. And the things, as I said, you stuck a dagger right into my soul in that last conversation, not the Bryce is right conversation we had. I mean, that was like, you might as well just reach through the screen and just slapped me across my face, because that totally caught me off guard.
You didn't tell me if that was good or not.
No, good. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. That was the part that was missing from the story.
Okay. So my daughter is half Korean, right? She's half Korean. And I cannot imagine it is one of the things I think about so frequently, because it's very obvious the fact that she's half Korean, In fact, she's like a little clone of me. I'm not sure if you ever saw her, but she goes to school and she can be discriminated for being like a lot of biracial kids can't attend public schools because they get bullied so much for not being like pure-blooded Korean, A
lot of biracial kids get bullied in the United States too.
Oh yeah.
Especially right. If you went to school in rural Georgia when they had segregated proms.
The point being is that I would feel devastated beyond any words to know that my daughter was being discriminated against. So if that's the position that you feel like a trans parent is in, there's no way I could not sympathize and empathize with that. That hurts me to know that people, that's what they feel like from their perspective, that they're being discriminated against for who they are. Like, that's not.
Do you think that they are? Transgender people. Do you think that transgender people are being discriminated against worldwide, but in the United States in particular?
Obviously, we had this talk on Discord. I was telling you, I don't really know everything that's going on in America. And it's like, I know it's kind of an ignorance card I can play, but I really don't know everything. Like,
no, but you follow laws and legislation and stuff like that.
I do, but you got to understand, this is like, think of this as a gradient. In South Korea, it's 100 times worse for that community than it is in America. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, whoa, you have all of these riots, and you have these parades, and you have advocacy groups. South Korea is like 20 years in the past, like in a lot of like culturally. I remember whenever I was about around 10 years old, they outlawed smoking in California, like in like restaurants. You'd always go in like Denny's and like, you want smoking or non-smoking, as if somehow the smoke was going to stay in your section, like it wasn't going to float over to the non-smoking section. That's it. They would always ask you that. Do you want a smoking or non-smoking? And so maybe around 10 years ago, South Korea finally made that illegal, And so we're like behind the culture and fashion and stuff. Like here, it's catching up. So when, like, for example, like trans people can't serve in the military here,
They couldn't serve in the military here last year either.
But say that again, that last line.
They couldn't serve in the military in the United States 2 years ago.
I know. And I'm totally against that. I mean, but that was done like by like an executive like thing by Trump. So I was totally against that. But
it doesn't matter how it's done though, right? It's they're either discriminated against or they're not. Like whether it's done by executive order or laws.
Okay. Okay. Yes, I would say they are discriminated against, but for me, it's hard for me to parse that, because I live in a place where they have like no rights whatsoever. So it's like, to me, I look to America and I'm like, this seems like and I don't know, maybe my perception is totally wrong.
Well, I guess that's what I'm asking. Like, what is your perception, not about South Korea, but about America? It's either you think they're being discriminated against, you don't think they're being discriminated against, or you don't know.
The behavior of Christians towards this community is horrific, dude. I will say that it is absolutely, unequivocally, horribly horrific. I will say that, okay?
But that's not my concern. But
I know. So, but they vote. So they vote, and yeah, they pass laws. And I mean, I've tried to present to you what are ways we could both ways that we could both compromise on this. But if I make those kind of statements, I just get it from both. It's like, I guess Jesus said it's better to be hot or cold. And
I'm trying to help you, Isaiah. I'm going somewhere with this. The reason I asked you the question was, and you just said Christians vote and they pass laws, which to me suggests, yes, you do think that there is some discrimination towards transgender people in the United States, right? My next question was going to be, do you think are you supportive of those discriminatory laws or not?
Am I personally?
Yeah.
Well, I've already said the military one. That they definitely deserve the right to serve. Anyone who's willing to take up arms for the military, I have. My mom was a Vietnam veteran. My sister served here in South Korea. So
that's not the one I'm talking about, though.
Hold on. Give me a minute, Bryce. You can't expect me to answer everything. So that I've advocated, I've said, I think maybe it should be a process in which they're allowed to compete. Like doing so, everything immediately, I think would uproot women's sports. So it has to be something that, like, let's say women know right now, hey, in 10 years, you're going to have to
about the bathroom bill.
Let me finish. Let's say you told them in 10 years, you're going to be competing with transgender people. So you really need to start stepping up your game. I think given that kind of time, they can get into the mindset of maybe competing with people who have a physical advantage. That might be a good thing for them, honestly. I mean, I interviewed an LGBT, a gay boxer on the channel, and she was telling me, hey, that's probably would help out the women, because now they have to raise up their competition level. So, I mean, that made a lot of sense to me. That made a lot of sense to say that. As far as the bathroom, I mean, you're probably not going to like it, but I just think that there should be neutral spots for them to use.
It doesn't matter if I like it or not.
Well, that's what I've said.
The question I'm trying to get to is, if you support the discriminatory bills, then that's the reason why people in the community might be against you. It's not because you don't donate to LGBTQ charity. You can do all of that other stuff, but the thing that they're against is discrimination. If you can acknowledge that you're part of the discrimination, that's why people would be against you. It's all of that other stuff doesn't matter. You're entitled to believe whatever you want, your religion, all of that stuff, but it's the things that people do. If you support discrimination and these people are being discriminated against, they don't like you. It's actually very simple, right?
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Okay, well,
okay,
pretty black and white. Thank you.
Yeah. So if you want to change the perception, you can have conversations with them all day long, and you can have many discussions. But if at the end of the day you've still settled on, I still don't think you should have the same rights, that you're not making headway in getting them to, I know you want them to like you, but are they going to like you if you're for laws that discriminate against them? Probably
like me.
Or whatever the case, whatever.
Well,
you don't want to be perceived as trans. You don't want to be perceived as hateful or transphobic or any of these things. But I'm just telling you, that's the reason they would perceive you that way. Not all this other stuff that is important too. But that's what they're looking at.
Well, I get exactly what you're saying, and I'm not trying to rebut you, but I mean, I think what you said makes sense. I do think it is very hypocritical that, if you are, an advocate, you are, I would call you an activist myself, a trans activist. But if you want to have you want to stand up for the rights for people that you don't know, say a transgender person a transgender female who wants to go to a female jail, prison. If you want to stand up for that random person that you don't know, and I want to tell you that, hey, I think you owe me the respect to at least be willing to have these conversations. If you're asking me for my daughter to be put in situations that's going to make her uncomfortable, okay? So if my daughter comes to me and says, I'm uncomfortable by the situation, you have to be able to hear me out and try to work out something. If you feel that way, if you feel that you don't owe me any kind of conversation or any kind of respecting of my opinions, I'm just well, whatever. If that's what you guys feel, you guys have that kind of level of fascist thinking, then go to hell at that point, because
so you talked about gaslighting at the beginning.
Yeah.
So you've used the word fascism a couple of
times.
Yeah.
Well, that is fascist thinking. That's fascist thinking.
Well, actually, it's not.
It is. It absolutely.
But more to the point, it's definitely, isn't that the type of gaslighting you said you didn't want, you wanted?
Well, it is. But I'm going to stand my point of this ground. If you're telling me you don't care what I think or my daughter thinks, and you don't want to hear anything, and you don't know anybody, any kind of explanation, then I really don't give a shit what you have to say at that point, Bryce.
Do you think that I'm one of those people?
No, I'm not saying Bryce. This is not Brycearonee. I'm just saying, when I say you, it's like saying they. You know what I mean?
Have you encountered anyone who doesn't care what your daughter thinks?
Well, you told me I shouldn't. You told me that I shouldn't mention my daughter in these conversations. And I really, that Christian and me wants to tell you to go fornicate yourself. And I'm trying not to.
You can mention your daughter. I don't care whether you mention your daughter or not. If you're bringing your daughter up as a subject of conversation, that's fine. But don't get offended when the other person responds about that subject, right? It goes both ways. It's not that you can't bring up your daughter and then say, but I'm not allowed to talk about your daughter because you brought her up. You made her a part of the discussion, So once you make her a part of the discussion, then that's fair. That would be fair game.
No. That's not my issue. That's not my issue at all.
Right.
issue
So that's what I'm
is
asking. Like, has anyone actually said, I don't care about the opinion of your daughter?
in those words. No, but I mean,
They've
whenever
implied
you
it?
absolutely, it's absolutely implied if I can't even express concerns or ask questions. And I don't
No,
know.
not you, your daughter.
Well, my daughter's only 4 years old. She doesn't understand any of this. You know what I mean? I'm
Correct. So
just
she
saying that,
hasn't offered an opinion on this.
but there's
You've
other
offered
people
your
that,
opinion.
okay, take Isaiah out of the equation. There are other evangelicals who have daughters who are going to go and compete in swimming, and transgender female are going to be dressing in front of them, and that might make them uncomfortable.
It
So,
might. And I would be totally open to listening to the opinion of those daughters. What I
okay,
don't care about are the opinions of the people speaking on behalf of their daughters, who I haven't heard the voices of the daughters, because they're projecting their own issues onto, like, that could just be their personal bias. I don't know that because a woman is competing in the sport that she would be uncomfortable until she tells me. So I want to hear what she has to say, and if she tells me that she's uncomfortable, then I would want to have a conversation with her. But
okay,
when someone says, I don't want my daughter being in this situation because I'm uncomfortable or because she's uncomfortable, I don't know that that's true.
okay,
Whether the adult is uncomfortable, I don't care. I care about whether
that's
the
fair.
daughter is uncomfortable, right? Yeah.
That's fair.
So that's why I said that's probably, I don't remember saying don't use your daughter in these discussions, but what I was probably trying to say is I'm more interested in the opinion of the people who are actually affected. And you brought up jail. You said if you're okay with transgender women going to the women's prison, and then you transition straight into your daughter talking about she might be uncomfortable. Is your daughter going to jail? Like what are you trying to say here? Like, if your daughter's in jail and she's a criminal, I might not care what she thinks at that point, right? But I do think that everyone should have the same right. So if your daughter's not in jail and she's not going to be in jail, or you don't plan on that, and she hasn't expressed an opinion about her cellmates, then like, why make that connection? You know what I mean? That's the only thing I'm trying to say with that.
No, that's fine. That's fair. I mean,
Okay.
it's reasonable to have this conversation with you, but I do want to.
You had
Just
one
real
more
quick.
question, I think.
Yeah, but real quick, I didn't really get to ask you. But do you think that the Biden appointments to the gay, is she the press secretary, and then I think the secretary of health, she's a transgender woman. So do you think that helps people who are in the community to see like successful, functional people, like in government or out in the open or whatever?
I mean, I don't, without speaking to the individuals because I don't know them, generally speaking, when you have diversity and representation, it's a good thing for people who can see others like themselves. That's not how I judge politicians. That do I think it was a good appointment? I think, as you're asking, I can't answer that because I don't know anything about
No, I'm actually not asking. I'm just saying.
I think it's good that he's going for diversity and that he's appointing people who look different, and he's appointing women, and he's appointing people of different, gender identities and sexual. That in principle is good. Whether or not his specific appointments are good is completely separate from that. And if he's only doing it for that reason, I'm against that too.
Yeah, it just, I'm not saying one way or the other what I think about their qualifications, but it just would make sense that being a deliberate thing to try to one, to normalize it, and then two, like to try to show that, hey, you can't, to the people who are in that community right now, that hey, you can still be a functional member of society and a good person. You don't have to be like the only two other times I think I saw a transgender person in movies was Ace Ventura and then Silence of the Lambs. So whenever you see that's your only depiction of yourself on TV, that could be really devastating psychologically for the person,
Yeah, I mean, there's transgender people all over the media now, and there's shows about transgender people. Pardon?
I said there is. I don't know.
Yeah, so there's shows about transgender people. There's movies that have transgender actors, and so I think that it's becoming more normalized in mainstream liberal, liberal, whatever that means. In Hollywood, it's becoming more mainstream, and so I think that that's definitely better, but
Yeah.
But yeah, when it comes to this specific people, if they're only doing it just to have representation, I'm against that, because they should be doing more. There's more that they could be doing for the community than just showing representation. But go on.
Do you watch MMA?
Not really. I've seen MMA fights before, but I generally don't watch it.
Have you ever seen the way they kick each other's legs?
Sometimes.
Yeah. Do you know the guy Conor McGregor?
I've heard of him.
Okay, so he's like the Mike Tyson, like, of MMA.
Mm-hmm.
And he recently got into a fight with was maybe like 2 years ago, but the guy kept kicking him in his calf.
Mm-hmm.
And his calf wound up getting really swollen. And so later on, as the fight was progressing, Conor McGregor couldn't move around as easily. And so there was a position where he would have been able to, like, naturally just move out of the situation, but you could clearly see that he just didn't have, they call it like having the legs to where you can bounce around. And so he tries to move out of the way, and the guy just hits him, just boom, right in the face and knocks him out. I feel like you've kicked my shins and my thighs a lot, and it hurts like hell whenever you do, you know?
Well, it's not my intention to cause harm.
No, I'm not saying it in a bad way.
And I don't know what specifically that was about, but I'm trying to help you actually with the things that you're coming to me with. A lot of the problems that you say that you're having, the goal that you say you're having, I'm trying to give suggestions or ideas about how you could reach that goal in ways that maybe you haven't done by now. Maybe ideas you haven't thought of before. I hope that's what I'm doing.
I appreciate you more than you know. Even you're the only person who's taken the time to write up a response to the conversation that we had. You know, I told how much I appreciate that you took the time, and you even sent me that really cool video. But you taken the like non-gender bathrooms. I think those are a really good idea. I told you that. But anyway, the point is you took the time to criticize where you thought I was wrong. And you have made another impact. You told me, and I was hoping that you would have said this, but you didn't say it, because I had referred to biological women as women, and you were telling me that could be like seen as discriminatory against a trans woman, and so that certainly was not the way that I was using it, you know. So you have even helped me to change that. I mean, Monkey for Bananas, just so you know, had to correct me about 10 times in saying transsexual. He like, it's transgender, Isaiah. It's transgender. It's trans. And I'm like, dude, sorry, not dude, because they've transitioned. But I'm like, I'm trying. And
transsexual is a thing too, but that may not have been what you were talking about.
But you know, even in the conversation, she told me that Gary Milne, Dorothy Dawkins, called Arden of Eden a tranny. And I was like, I didn't know what that meant. Like, I literally did not know what that was, like an insult. And he's like, well, that's essentially like calling a transgender person the N-word. I'm like, I had no idea, because I'm listening to it and it doesn't register in my mind. So Bryce, I will leave you before you get to this last one. I do want to tell you this. I may have told you this, but after living in South Korea for 5 years, I went back to America, and I went to like this conference, and this guy made a transgender joke when he said he said he saw a guy riding like a girl's bike, and then he goes, you know what? Whenever I was a kid, we used to have guys' bikes and girls' bikes. And then he goes, you know, whenever I was a kid, we used to have boys and girls. And like everybody started laughing. And I'm like, I don't even know. I can't even get the joke. I'm like looking around. I'm like, where's this joke coming from? Because I was that ignorant to what was going on because I lived here in South Korea. You know what I'm saying? So it's like,
but you get the joke now, right?
Oh, absolutely. I don't find it funny, but I don't find it funny to make someone who might kill themselves, like, to make jokes at their expense. Like, I don't find that funny. You know what I mean?
Good.
I did say a joke, which you didn't exactly like, about the porta potty one, but I think I had the same kind of mentality that Dave Chappelle had, where it's like, hey, if you really like, he made a transgender joke about his transgender friend, and I can understand his mentality, though I believe this, I might be right in saying this, is that if you want to be welcome to the fold and you want to be loved like everyone else, like you just have to take a joke, and you have to, it's not because we're trying to hurt you or hate you, but that's just a way, like I'll tell you this, I told you this, my Muslim friend, I send him like Muslim jokes, and during Ramadan, I was sending him all kinds of pictures of food every day because I love him and I want him to know that I see so much further than the Islam, so much further than that. I love him. I was rooting for him, but it was like just a little joke. You know what I mean? It wasn't.
So you mentioned Dave Chappelle, and in a very benign sense, because you basically said, I think I was just being like Dave Chappelle. Is Dave Chappelle transphobic?
Well, you and I would probably just describe what it means transphobic very differently. In my mind,
let me rephrase the question. Do you think that people who are transgender, do you think that the transgender community as a whole considers him to be transphobic?
I didn't see a special, and I haven't heard everything. I can understand, yes, but then I could also understand that what would be going through his mind. He has this person who is his friend, and he gives them an opportunity to get on a stage. So it's not intended to like, I'm going to cut you guys down. The point is that if you're making jokes about whatever you call it, like do you know Lisa Lampanelli?
Hold on, I don't want to get away from Dave Chappelle quite yet, because hold on. You said you didn't see the special, right?
No, I didn't.
I did. So I'm familiar with the story that he told. I'm also familiar with all the other jokes he told leading up to the story, and all the other jokes he had told in other specials before that story. So I'm just saying, maybe the perspective I have on Dave Chappelle might be different from yours. And if you're comparing yourself to him, saying, look, I'm not that bad, I'm just like Dave Chappelle, maybe that doesn't work with the trans community, So yeah, go ahead now. Bring up.
Please, good. Finish.
No, that was it. It was just, I have a perspective on Dave Chappelle that I've talked about on my show with David C. Smalley, another comedian. But I have thoughts about what Dave Chappelle said in the special, including that story he told, and how much weight it carries, and juxtaposing that with everything else he said. And I think Dave Chappelle has some growing to do still. I think Dave Chappelle even said that he still had some growing to do. But Dave Chappelle may not view himself as transphobic because he has a transphobic friend. Donald Trump doesn't view himself as racist because he has a black, as he likes to say. He loves the blacks,
He says, I have a black.
So, people, I'm not interested in how people judge themselves based on the people that they say that they have friends with or that they've helped or whatever. I'm interested in the things that they say and the things that they do. And I think that the affected communities are entitled to judge them based on that.
So, Bryce, this is the third conversation we have, and I don't want to keep beating dead horses, and I certainly don't want to continue a victim of Oz's wrath on me. So this is going to be the last talk that we have on this. I do want to say,
open to other discussions, yeah. I think you're right. We've probably done this topic enough times to where maybe we can move on to some other things.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, though, the thing is, just so you know, into my mind, is that the problem is that people try to solve every part of the issue in a single talk, and I simply don't believe that that's possible. I believe you can talk, have a cooling off period, put some flags in the sand. You help me to reevaluate my position. I may be not peeing right now, but there's a little bit of drizzle that's coming out because I am trying. I am putting out the effort. And quite frankly, if I didn't care, I wouldn't be having these conversations with you. You know what I mean? I'd be like,
I think so. What was that? I think so. You threw me off with the peeing. But
I mean, I'm trying to pee. I'm trying to be to the level that you want me to be at, or the place that Oz or any other person wants me to be at.
Where do you want to be? Don't worry about where I want you to be. Where do you want to be? Yeah.
I want to love every person the way that I love myself. I mean, I genuinely feel that, and I genuinely feel
every person you want to love. the way you love yourself? Is that realistic?
Maybe it's not realistic, but I mean, people like Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un and Putin, I still pray for those people because I understand that they're under some kind of spiritual oppression. And so I may disagree with things that they do, but it doesn't mean, like Matt Gaetz, doesn't mean I hate these people. I want to love them, to try to think, if my life, I was like that person, how would I want someone else to view me and to care about my concern? That's my honest to God. If I didn't believe that way, Lord, please strike me down with the lightning bolt in this exact moment. And so it does hurt me that I have caused damage because I know that's not my intent. But I try to have, and maybe this is the problem, I try to have the conversations as honestly and as vulnerable as humanly possible. Bryce, I've told you so many things on camera and off the camera that I really wish weren't true. I really wish a lot of this stuff was not true about myself, you know? I really wish I was a better father, a better husband, and a better Christian, and a better human. Those are just realities of where I'm at. I don't meet up to everything that I'm striving for, you know? So
I think it's easier for me because all of my expectations about myself, one, are realistic and achievable. Doesn't mean I achieve all of them, but they're at least achievable. And I think you may have some unrealistic expectations of yourself that are not achievable. And when you set that standard, then you never achieve them. You know, I don't know what it means to be a perfect Christian or perfect, whatever. But I do know what it means to have morally consistent views, right? My goal is not to love everybody. My goal is to only love good people and to get rid of the bad people because they're the problem for the good people, right? So it's very clear and easy for me. Christianity might not allow you to do that because it has ideas about everybody being a sinner. You said that you didn't think sinning and evil was the same thing. It has ideas about loving your enemies, and I don't have any of those ideas, right? So for me, it's very easy. I don't have these dilemmas. They don't keep me up at night because I'm very clear about the things that I support, and I'm very clear about the things that I'm against, and I'm not moderate on anything. I'm either progressive or conservative on specific things. There are, believe it or not, some issues that I'm conservative about. Not many.
Knocked me over with a feather. Well, I do want to say one last final thank you. There is one last question, which actually it plays right into this. I will say that I feel like even Oz, you might think I dislike Oz. I still pray for Oz all the time. You know what I mean? Like I pray for, I don't have any ill will. I don't troll his channels or anything like that. And so,
do you think that's a complimentary statement to an atheist, telling them that you pray for them?
Well,
I'm just curious.
So regardless of what you think or not about that, the point is that I don't have ill intentions about wanting to see Oz hurt. I mean, I know he hasn't. I suffered from insomnia. I heard he recently got divorced. I mean, I wouldn't wish any ill will or negativity towards him or anyone else in the atheist or LGBT community. That's just the reality. But so the last question I do want to give you is it necessary to love to also accept? And then also, since this is our last talk on this topic, anything else you would like to say about this community or any last thoughts? You can go off on 5 minutes if you want. I am going to remove myself again, and maybe I'll let you go for about 3 or 4 minutes and I'll come back on.
Do you want me to give you my answer while you're gone, or do you want to hear my answer? Or
no, I'm going to be hearing you, but I want to give the stage to the Bryce is somewhat right. The Bryce is neutral. Okay, you have an odd platform. Just say whatever you want right now. I'm trying to respect you, give you the spotlight. So go ahead.
Okay. Ready? So before I get to the answer to the question was, is it necessary to love to also accept? I'll get to that. The part of the 5 minutes I'm going to use addressing the last thing that you talked about. When you start talking, I asked you if you think it's complimentary to say that you will pray for an atheist, and you didn't answer that. The reason I asked the question is because most atheists perceive that as insulting, because what you're actually saying is that there's something wrong with you, that God can fix. And that's obviously something atheists don't accept. So it's okay. I'm not saying that you shouldn't pray for people if that's what your faith is, if that's what your belief is, but that's not something that you need to share with an atheist. It's not something that's going to ingratiate you to atheists, because it's something that we don't really appreciate. It's something we don't believe in. And it's you acknowledging that you think that there's a problem with us that a God can fix that hasn't fixed anything for us. So maybe just keep that to yourself if you want to be loving and respectful of atheists. Okay. With respect to the question, is it necessary to love to also accept? It depends on what you mean by accept. If by acceptance you mean recognizing that there are things, that things are a certain way, and admitting that this is the way that things are, and that the acceptance of reality, that it doesn't mean that you have to like it, right? For example, I accept that there are rapists and murderers and racists and homophobic people and transphobic people in the world, but I don't love them. So that's probably a difference between me and you. So yes, it is possible for me to accept certain realities but not love people. But I'm not sure if that's what you're asking. If by acceptance you mean having the same level of compassion or extending the same level of fairness, equality, equity, rights, and respect for your children, irrespective of their sexual orientation or gender identity, well then yes, loving means accepting. Accepting means loving. If you're talking about accepting in that way, then they go hand in hand. That's the demonstration of love. So it depends on your usage of accept. And that is my answer to that. I think that was all of the questions. I'm looking through the list to see if there's anything I missed. Okay, he's still not back. Hello to everyone in the chat, by the way, which I've been completely ignoring, but I don't mean to ignore everybody. I appreciate, I recognize some of the names. Monkey for banana. Cool.
Any last thoughts before we wrap this up? Like a burrito?
Last thoughts. I mean, I guess it would just be I'm happy to have a discussion on a different topic at some point in the future. I think that, like you said, we've kind of, beat a dead horse here. I don't know that there's that much more to discuss about the LGBTQ community, and especially about transgender issues without a transgender person in the conversation, because that's about the extent of my knowledge, right? So hopefully you will ruminate with that, and hopefully I didn't upset you too much. No, I generally like to separate emotions from the logical, rational arguments that I'm making. Sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not, but maybe that would help. I think
this is Bryce. If you upset me, see, you already have the knife in your hand right here to stab me. No, I mean that you may have saw that as like, and that I'm saying that as a negative thing, but it's like,
now that you've told me it's positive, I see that it's but you didn't say for the first time you mentioned it. So
rather than trying to knock me out in a single punch, you're kicking out my legs, my calves from underneath me, and I would be lying to say that it's not always. It is uncomfortable. It is hurtful to know that I've hurt people in the community. But I am grateful that you've taken the time to have the conversations with me.
My last piece of advice would be, you can't please everybody. So if you've set that for a goal for yourself, that might be an unattainable goal. That might not be a realistic goal. So figure out which type of people you want to please, recognizing that you can't please everyone, and then push everyone else that you can't please to the side and only worry about the people who you want to please. And that's a reasonable, attainable goal that I think you can do.
Maybe I need to be more like Bryce. Maybe I need to be right more, but I'm wrong. You're right more than me because it's in your name. So, but okay. Yeah. That being said, I don't want to talk too much right now, so I'm just going to play the intro because while it is Mother's Day, so I am still a bit emotional with that. I heard Bryce, Oz saying that he was celebrating his first Mother's Day without a mom. So I definitely know how painful that can be. I could tell him if he listens to this, my mom died on my birthday 14 years ago, and April 13th. So I just celebrated 14 years, and I still think about her every single day. Like there's never been a day I've never not thought about her, and it's gotten easier because I had a mental breakdown afterwards, but just allow yourself to feel the pain and don't think that you have to present this perfect image of yourself that's, not vulnerable or sorry, that's my last thought.
That's already better. Everything that you just said there is better than I'll pray for you. Like that's something that an atheist would actually might be like, oh, okay, this guy cares. Like this guy isn't a terrible, you know what I mean? So I'm just saying, keep that in my mind. I like what you did there. I appreciate what you did. Do more of that and less of the I'll pray for you. And then you'll probably get less resistance from the atheist community.
The only reason, I will take your advice, but the only reason why I mentioned that is because you might assume that I have some kind of ill will because I've mentioned some of the things that he's done, because it is just so genuinely hurtful. I know he thinks I hurt people in the community, but that is generally hurtful for me. I'm not just a screen name. I'm not, I'm not just a YouTube channel. I have feelings. I have emotions. I have a daughter who I want to raise in a more empathetic and compassionate world. I don't want her to experience bigotry or hatred or anything like that. I don't want to teach that to her. And I'm doing my best here, but I'm sorry if that's not always the best for you. I can tell you I'm trying, you know what I mean? If not just for me, for my daughter. I'm trying to be a better person for her. But anyway, I do want to leave you with this. If you could stick around for a quick minute, Brycearonee, here we go. And before I went, last thing, I'm not going to plug the channel. I'm just going to say, this is Bryce right here. This is the sinister Bryce right here. And you should have put the hat on, man. You look great. Bryce, it's total jealousy that I talk about your hair, because the good Lord took away all my hair. So anyway, thanks again, Bryce. And leave you with this outro. And man, I'll probably be crying for the rest of the day today. So